to France to Lyon, Rouvière, the Jesuit theologiate there, and I met Father de Lubac. Father de Lubac is a great Jesuit, a wonderful scholar, beautiful human being, but he was considered dépassé. He was outmoded. But I spent a lot of time with him. In fact, he was sick off and on because he was injured in World War I. And so I was his secretary. He would dictate to me and I'd do the letters for him. Well, when it came time after 3 years for me to consider a doctorate, I went to him and I said, Father de Lubac, my provincial wants me to do further studies. What do you suggest I do my thesis on? And he said, oh, Hans Urs von Balthasar, the greatest theologian of our time, perhaps of all time. And I said, oh, wonderful. But where shall I do that? He said, well, there's a young theologian at Ratisbona, Regensburg, Professor Ratzinger. He's going to do great things, but he's a wonderful theologian. He's a friend of mine. I'll write him. So Father de Lubac wrote to Father Ratzinger and had me accepted for the doctoral studies in Regensburg. So I had the chance of being with de Lubac, Balthasar, Ratzinger, Louis Bouillet, and these were giants. I mean, these men were wonderful men in the church, great scholars, tremendous sense of humor, knowledge of history, love of art, everything which makes a man, whole. When I came back to the United States, I saw it was a desert. We had very little theology, or that you could call theology. And so I started a reading group with some friends. And I would take some passages from von Balthasar, Adrian von Speyer, his directee, de Lubac, and I'd read them, we'd discuss them. And they said, we need to start a publishing company. So the first thing we did was we translated some books for another publisher named Alba House. But around 1978, I got a visit from Frank Sheed. Frank Sheed was the doyen, the dean of Catholic publishing in the first half of the 20th century. Sheed and Ward was his publishing company. He was a tremendous man, a great apologist, a wonderful writer, and just a hero of the faith. And so I said to him, he was old at that time, I said, well, Mr. Sheed, do you think we should continue preparing manuscripts for other people, or should we do our own publishing company? He said, oh, by all means, start your own, but be ready for 10 years of grief. So that was 1978. We went to the library, picked out books we liked the size, picked out books we liked the paper, picked out books we liked the typeface, and put them together. But because it was 1978, that was 10 years after Humani Vitae. So our first publication was actually a new translation of Humani Vitae for a conference that we put on. And then in 1979, we published our first two books, Woman in the Church by Louis Bouillet and Heart of the World by Hans Urs von Balthasar. So basically, it was a recognition that we needed this kind of profound kniende Theologie, kneeling, praying theology that was deeply rooted in the church's tradition. We needed that. If you would stack up the books we sold last year, it would be 18 miles high. That's maybe 22, 23 kilometers high. It's a lot of books, yeah. So God has blessed us. God has blessed us. And by the way, this is not Ignatius Press. This is our retreat house. We actually work in a regular office in San Francisco, but we come up here on the weekends when we can to continue our work here and just get a little fresh air. So we've had two extraordinary popes, John Paul II and Benedict XVI. Both of them are very photogenic. Both of them also have a deep spirituality and a personal love that just radiates. And so I think this generation has had the chance to see, writ large, the priesthood in the persons of John Paul II and Benedict. So that's having an effect. Another thing which is very important is that the 60s, 1968 and so on in France and elsewhere, was a time of revolution, of getting rid of the past, of looking with disdain upon what went before. And there was this idea that before Vatican II, everything was bad, but now it's all good. Well, the generation that thought that way is now my age, getting ready to die, all right? The younger generation, they haven't seen that yet. But I was talking to a girl, a wonderful girl, 21 years old, very mature girl. And I said, well, you know, Kathy, you weren't even born when the council ended. And she said, Father, my parents weren't born when the council ended. I said, what? I said, yeah, my dad's only 40 years old. And I realized that there's a whole generation that never knew the time before the council. All they know is that there's a lot of nonsense going on, and they don't like it. They love tradition. Also, to take France as an example, you have vocations in the movements, I movimenti, and also from the Society of Fraternity of St. Peter, where they have the traditional Mass. There are more vocations coming from there. So wherever you find religious orders and groups of priests that are more traditional, you find vocations. In this country, there's a group called the Nashville Dominicans and another group called the Dominicans of the Mary the Mother Eucharist, and they have dozens and dozens and dozens of novices every year. You know, why? Because they're faithful to where they have it. They keep the prayer life, you know, they keep the rules they've always had. With and in the church. And so we don't promote any particular devotions like the Green Scapular or the Miraculous Medal. They're okay, but for us, it's the Mass, the Divine Office, the Rosary, and personal prayer. Because if you don't have personal prayer, then the other sacraments or sacramentals become empty. I prefer the Mass I celebrated this morning. It's the new Mass, but it's facing east, using Latin for the parts that don't change, but English for the parts that do, and then having just priests in the sanctuary and kneeling for communion and singing chant, you know.